Welcome to Make a Difference with Phil Martelli. I am Jared Phillips. You are once again dressed to the nines. It's been a busy day for you, as it seems like every day is at this point. I assume we'll get through what the whirlwind of this lead up to college hoops is for you in just a moment. But I'm sure another busy week for Phil Martelli.
Yeah, it was a busy week, but a very productive week. And the responses that we're getting have been just terrific. So keep coming, keep bringing information, keep bringing suggestions. Last week was just terrific with George being on and giving us the behind-the-scenes look at public education. I am anxious to share. And there's a couple of there's one that's very poignant on something that I'm missing out on this week. And then there's another one that are going to make people say, I'll take your place for that other activity that you can't make, but we'll get to that. I think we really should start with the college basketball landscape. It's starting to amp up. We talked last week about the scrimmages, the secret scrimmages, the charity exhibitions. And I thought in brainstorming, something behind the scenes that people would like to hear about is scheduling. Because everybody wants to play, when you're good, you want to play all these really good teams, and you don't understand how they won't agree to play you. Everybody wants to play home games as much as they can. So just some thoughts on scheduling. You have to start with an honest assessment. I'm talking about the coaching staff, right? You have to start with an honest assessment about where you are 2 years out. And that's difficult in today's world with the transfer portal. You have to be striving for an MTE. Multiple team event. There's a couple of things there. You can get on a neutral court. You can get your players to places like Maui or Orlando or Charleston, and it's a little bit of a respite around Thanksgiving or the multiple team events. You can also get yourself in a situation, neutral court, and playing teams that maybe are ranked higher than you or come from a league that is higher than you. What you have to really consider, though, is how does that impact academics? Because here we are moving late in the semester, and in a lot of places, you're taking your young men away from campus for almost a week. You have to measure that. You have to think about, are you equipped as a program, and are we equipped as a school to take that kind of academic blow, so to speak? You want to look at opportunity. You want to look at setting. So the multiple team event kicks into right after you schedule, obviously, your league, 20 games. Now you do multiple team. And now you have to start thinking about a balance, home, away. Ticket sales are part of this. Everybody wants to play at home. And sometimes when you're out of sight, out of mind. Think about some of those MEAC schools, and they play the whole month on the road. That's a challenge academically. It's a challenge socially. It's a challenge for creating excitement. You want to think about styles that you'll play in your league. Who are the best teams in your league, and what are their styles of play? Think about that when you're talking about scheduling. Are you an at-large possibility? And again, you're 2 or 3 years out. It is a challenge. At-large consideration, they can give you all the net and they can give you the metrics and this type of thing. If you can win on the road in your league and in your non-conference, you give yourself a boost because the committee members look and say, hey, you know what? They took a chance. They went on the road. They took that challenge. I think it's important that someone on your staff, and then if you want to relay this to your fans, you understand the formula. What are they measuring now? Used to be, well, last 10 games. If we're last 10 games, we're pretty good. All right? You have to understand the decision maker. So when I call you, Jared, and when I was running the program at St. Joseph's, I made the call. And I would call, and there would be a scheduling. This young man or this department is in charge of scheduling. I would call and say, who's going to make the ultimate decision? How quickly can we get to a yes or a no? Not going to hurt my feelings if you say no, but let's get there as quickly as you can. You have to think about if you are a program that recruits further from your home base, do you want to take your players home? That's a consideration for getting scheduling done. It's easy to say for us as fans, for outsiders, let's play this, let's play them, but it takes two. You have to always understand, all right? And the challenge with projecting where your team is, where you could be, is daunting. You also have to understand that coaches sometimes have to schedule according to their contract, right? Everybody wants to keep these jobs. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I think at the end of the day, that selection Sunday to say, well, we were kept out because of our schedule. No, it's because who you played, where you played, and how you did. You lose a quad 3 or a quad 4, then the committee will hold that against you. You lose a quad 1, which is what we're seeing a lot of, the Power 5, Power 4 conferences now, Power 5 with the Big East. They're scheduling each other because that loss doesn't hurt as much as if you lost to a quad 3 or a quad 4 home game. A lot to go into it, but it is worth the conversation, and it's worth the conversation. A lot of it happens in May, as we know. College basketball fans are looking for something to discuss, and they'll often discuss scheduling. That's it in a nutshell.
It's insane calculus. I just had I figured you just called up Jay and like, are you guys free Wednesday? Like, can we get this rolling or what? No. Not even close.
Well, in some cases it is. In some cases you can make one phone call and say, hey, this game is a natural game. Now the Philadelphia Big Five games, they're different. Like they answer to a schedule that matches up with the Big Five Classic, if that's what they're calling it. But it takes a lot of calls and a lot of patience. And you know what? There have been friendships ended over scheduling. There have been friendships ended over scheduling because that young assistant coach is getting grilled by his head coach unless the head coach is intimately involved, which they should be, but they always can't be because of time.
Have you lost friendships over scheduling?
No, never. I frayed a few nerves in Arizona. I'm not sure that I could run for office in Arizona after what happened with Lute Olson years and years and years ago. But no, I never took it. I never took it personally. But what I wanted was yes or no. Can we play or not play? We'll work out the details. If you want to play at the Palestra instead of 54th and City Line, I get it, and I'm okay with that.
That, like I said, is the sheer calculus, the math, like you mentioned, I think that goes into all of it. It's 2 years in advance. It's so convoluted. You have no idea what your team might look like when you schedule those games.
Portal,
and it's unbelievable,
yeah,
truly.
Daunting.
Well, I do want to bring on our guest in just a moment. We got a great guest this week, but I know first,
Martelli Minute.
Before I'm getting there. That was my segue. Is I know that you want to introduce. I
know we're on the birthday week for you, so I'm wondering, like, am I getting all of you, or am I getting the celebratory Jared somewhere else?
It's not my birthday yet, as of this recording. So yeah, you're getting. I made sure I put it before that because otherwise, I'd have been useless. You got that Martelli Minute for us?
Martelli Minute. We have to say it's sponsored by Status Solutions. Status Solutions Network is committed to making a difference by providing Alicia's Law compliant safety technology to schools through a grant of use, ensuring that financial barriers never stand between students and proper safety. Each community has the power. Talk about make a difference. Each community has the power to create real change. Learn more at statussolutions.com. Statussolutions.com. We are delighted to be joined by them for the Martelli Minute. Are you ready? Focus your time and your talents on useful solutions and not wasteful excuses. The greatest regrets come from things not done, words unstated, dreams not pursued. Avoid these empty feelings. Wake up. be a child. Ready, set, go. And then the last one, you learn more through your silence. You learn more through your silence than by talking. And so do others.
Something I've learned in this podcast is let you go, and we usually get some good stuff going. If I just shut my trap and let you roll, that's worked pretty well for us thus far. But we do want to invite another voice into the room.
Please, this is a superstar right here.
We are definitely traveling into a new realm this week with Make a Difference. We want to welcome on Dr. Randall Miller of St. Joseph's University. Obviously, you guys go back a little bit. Dr. Miller, it's fantastic to have you on the show. We appreciate you coming on.
It's my honor to sit with two geniuses. I've been listening to the talk about basketball from, of course, one of the greatest coaches of this generation, or perhaps any generation. And you feeding him good stuff so that he can take us a little further inside the mysteries of college basketball. And today they are mysterious, given all the changes.
There we go. So Doc and I go way back. I don't know who's the second best professor that I've ever been around, and there are probably others that are tied with Doc, but he is as fine an educator and that I've been blessed to be around. And there were a lot of times, people would accuse me of running to TV and getting on TV. And every election season, who would be on there? And he could be talking about the controller in Montgomery County, or he could be talking about the biggest of the big elections, and it was always Doc. And I was so proud and so passionate in telling people, that's my friend. So we are again joined by royalty. So Doc, thank you. Welcome to Make a Difference. And if you could start us with this idea, your journey, Hope College to St. Joe's, where there's a fund, they honored you with a fund that I believe creates faculty grants so that everybody, the students can get better because the faculty's better because there's less of the financial constraints that go with all the research that you do, an author. How Hope College to 54th and City Line?
Well, there'd be a lot to say, but let me start with the commercial first. Thanks for mentioning the fund, the so-called Randall M. Miller Faculty Fund, to which people can give whatever kind of money they want. And basically what it does is it supports faculty research in the College of Arts and Sciences with small grants that make it possible for a lot of different people to complete projects, present their projects. And the basic understanding of that is actually what goes to the core of what St. Joseph's University is, why you were there, Phil, why I was there. I just retired. And that is the core personalis, to try to develop the whole person. And the idea there is that scholars are going to bring their work into the classroom. And what they learn in the classroom is also going to inform their work. And that kind of dynamic is actually one of the undergirding principles of that particular program, that funding program. So thanks for the nod to that. And thanks for giving me about 90 seconds to make a pitch for it. Now, in terms of personal journey, I'd like to say when people ask me this kind of question that I had a plan. And when I was 18 years old, I had no plan whatsoever. So I was happy to get into college. I lucked out in terms of where I went. It was a top tier school, despite my association. I had professors there who took an interest in me. They cultivated my interests, which is important. That's what we want to do as teachers, is cultivate, just like you as a coach cultivate. You want people to grow. They were very effective in that. I always loved history, and I was able then to think about perhaps doing something with it. I had planned to go to law school. I was talked out of it by a couple of professors, suggesting actually you'd probably have a richer life as a college professor. And they were right. I mean, now I can say this because I'm retired, that it's almost a scam being a college history professor, because they pay you to read books and you're going to read them anyway. You're around young people, the minds are open, the constant back and forth and what have you that keeps the brain alive. And it's something that really can't be replicated in any other way. And you had that as a coach, and I certainly had that as a professor, especially in a setting like St. Joseph's University, where you had small classes, where the commitment was to that kind of engagement with students, as opposed to just getting up and lecturing, blowing things off, walking off the stage, and I'm done. It was always about trying to have a relationship with students and a relationship with learning. So that came on early. I went to Ohio State. The first time I was ever funded, I put myself through college, and I went to school in those days where you could actually put yourself through college by working in legal professions. I didn't have to do anything that was in the dark corners of the alleys. But I finally got a lot of offers for some reason to go to Ohio State, and just for the college basketball connection, I agreed to go to Ohio State as opposed to somewhere else. They had a fantastic program, but I said I would definitely go if you gave me 2 basketball tickets, because I loved college basketball, and that sealed the deal. So I went there to Princeton. You figure it out. And it was a good move. I had great professors. I found interests that I hadn't anticipated. I went to school to study urban reform, city management, things like that. And I ended up studying a lot of different things, which paid off at St. Joe's, but especially looking at the 19th century in the United States, which was, I always consider the dynamic century, because intellectually, in terms of what difference did it make, this is the time, like the Renaissance earlier though, but this was the time when people literally had to learn how to think in totally new ways, because you had all of a sudden the capacity to collapse time and space. You had the train, you had the telegraph. Eventually, you go inside the human body. You could literally all of a sudden go anywhere. But by collapsing time and space, you could be 2 places at the same time. Initially just clicking out the little things on the telegraph. Later with the telephone, people had to rethink exactly how they approached the universe, how they approached everything around them, and that's a very exciting prospect. Which, of course, you want to relate to students as well. So I ended up got my PhD. Which eventually I translated into a book with more work. But I got my PhD. Miraculously, I got a job at a little school called Wesley College down in Dover, Delaware, a Methodist school, which a couple of years ago folded, was absorbed by Dell State. And then there was an opening at St. Joe's, and the providential hand was saying, I will guide you once more, young man. I got the job at St. Joseph's University. And then it was St. Joseph's College, the college as it was called. And for an American historian, being in Philadelphia is literally the promised land. We have some of the greatest research libraries in the world, but certainly in terms of the United States history, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, American Philosophical Society, founded by Benjamin Franklin. It's world class. The Library Company of Philadelphia collects anything in the Atlantic world in English from the 17th century to the end of the 19th century, world class. You can go down to the Franklin Institute, the Academy of Natural Sciences, all these kinds of places where you literally had primary sources unavailable anywhere else. How could you not be happy? How could you not succeed in a place like this? How could you not have a successful teaching career in a place like this, where you didn't have to rely on the classroom? You didn't have to stay on Hawk Hill, which we call it for St. Joe's. You could actually go and use the city, use the print materials, but use the city as well. A landscape for learning, I would call it. To get out there, see the architecture, the largest body of 18th, early 19th century buildings anywhere. So you get a real sense of that past. And that's the hardest thing I'm a historian to convey to people, is how it's, time transportation, which we can do with Doctor Who going forward and backwards. But in reality, it's very difficult to transport people to a different time, to get them to think what was it like to be at this place at a different time, in terms of why did people think that way? Why did they act that way? And for historians, the questions, of course, are who, what, where, how, when. But then you go to why and so what. But if you can actually see the things that people made, understand how they used the things that they made, it's a much richer experience than just simply relying on books. You can never walk away from it. So Philadelphia provided me with a tremendous opportunity to get close to sources in every sense, close to sources in terms of print materials, close to sources in terms of art and what have you, close to sources in terms of music, but close to sources as well in terms of physical things literally right in front of me. And that was very effective in terms of my own growth as a professor. And I think it worked very well in terms of helping students think larger and, quote, to use the old cliche, outside the box, because the box could simply be their study carrel in the library. Outside the box, there's a bigger world than we just have in books. There's a bigger world we just have on campus. There's a very big world out there. Let's try to understand it, because if we can understand it, we can play a role in it. We can, quote, make a difference in it.
Perfect. This just jumped at me. Your enthusiasm for Philadelphia is palpable, and I had this written on the back of one of my pages, but I have to bring it out right now. If someone was to come to you and say, Philadelphia, what is the one asset in Philadelphia or of Philadelphia that is undervalued?
Wow. Well, I'm going to ask that question. I think I'm getting at the direction you want. I think the thing that's most undervalued is Philadelphia itself by people who live and from Philadelphia.
Yes.
I don't think that we appreciate the richness of what we have. Part of it is we're in the shadow of New York, and there's that sense we're always, somehow the second player as opposed to the best player. But if you actually look what Philadelphia has, I mean, part of its location, for golly's sakes. I mean, here we're between New York, the train right away, Washington, the train right away. We got the mountains. If you want to go up there, we got the ocean. I mean, in one sense, we're perfectly located, but just what we have in Philadelphia, we have world-class music of every kind. I mean, part of it used to be simply we're on the route, but people come to Philadelphia for the music, created music here, the Philadelphia sound, two kinds of Philadelphia sound, the Philadelphia sound from the orchestra, the Philadelphia sound coming out of African-American music. We have, world-class art museums. We have world-class science, the meds and eds that drive the economy. We don't appreciate that Philadelphia is a major cosmopolitan city that has made big marks on the world. And this is what I'm going to add to this. I'm a native of Chicago, so I'm adopted Philadelphian. I've spent most of my life here. And I've never been able to figure out why we're not beating the drums for Philadelphia, because in Chicago, you beat the drums. People talk about being the windy city. It's not a windy city because windows coming off the lake. It's a windy city because of braggadocio. It's a windy city because Chicagoans know they can do anything. And when I ever get off the plane with Chicago, I can actually feel the power. I can feel the energy. I can feel the possibility. At one time, Chicago was sinking as a city. Well, some people would give up. No, not a problem. We'll simply jack the buildings up. And in Chicago, you build big. And you also build big knowing you can do it. I can build it higher. I can build it wider. I can build it more magnificent, a thing called creative destruction. We don't have that attitude in Philadelphia. We have the capacity. We have the resources, but somehow we lack this sense of self-confidence and purpose that says that we can do anything. And I think that's the biggest thing about Philadelphia. Now that's something I wouldn't advertise as a member of the Chamber of Commerce, because that's not a good thing to sell if you're trying to make a business from here. But if we're talking about what we can do for ourselves to make a difference, I think we can simply observe the riches we have and to play to and develop those riches of people, of all kinds of resources, and a will to say we can do better and we can show the world. At one time, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia were leaders in the world. We're much less so now. We were leaders in terms of reform, the capacity to create a new kind of society. Benjamin Franklin and all those people in the 18th century, all the way through the 19th century. At one time, we were the leaders in terms of development of finance, of manufacturing. The workshop of the world, it was called. Leaders in terms of art. We were leaders in all those things. We can still be leaders if we just believe in ourselves. So that's the thing I think I would emphasize more than anything else. Look around. I think you'll be really amazed at the resources we have. We just have to do them, use them.
This unbelievable background in history. But early in this conversation, you mentioned about urban planning. Is that where this fascination or focus for you became on the political landscape? Not just of the city, the area, nationally? Was that a combination?
Well, part of that interest simply derives from what I do as a historian of the United States. I mean, how can you not? We're a created people, and our greatest creation, in one sense, is this experiment. As Lincoln said, even the last best hope of mankind is this experiment in self-government and how it can work. So you have to be interested in that. But also part of it's simply personal, that I had a very politically oriented family, especially my mother, who raised me, and she was very much involved in city planning and civic affairs. And even as a boy, I was working in Chicago for the only Republican sitting on city council. I think it was like 12 years old, 13 years old, but getting an inside look, especially an inside look to get somebody who has no chance whatsoever of ever having any of his actions affected through legislation. But it was a certain fascination that with how do you make things work? And you make things work in a variety of ways, but you make things work also through and with government. And to me, that was always fascinating. And so even as I was going to school, I was always involved in various kinds of political activities and working for campaigns and things like that. So in one sense, I was bred to it. And the other says, I'm suggesting just by my profession, I think as anybody who's an educator, how can you not be interested in politics? I mean, public education, for example, is deeply affected by politics. People don't think about it, but your school boards, I mean, those are political. Your legislators are providing the revenues and perhaps even shaping curriculum. So virtually almost every aspect of life in the United States is affected by politics in some way. It doesn't mean we're highly politicized, although we are today, but it's affected by politics because politics shapes government, and government often affects what we do. And people say, well, government doesn't matter. But if you look around, government matters in virtually everything. If you go out on the road, if checking if the street lights are on, I mean, some of the stuff is most basic. If you have a contract and you want to make sure the contract is actually respected and you have relief, if there's something goes wrong with it, you can go to a court system. Government touches every aspect of our lives. Politics is how you control government. So how could you not be involved? How could you not be interested? And that's something else you try to convey to students. That doesn't mean they have to become, involved in campaigns, these kind of things, but they, as citizens, responsible people, wanting to have some control over their lives and be able to make a difference in their communities, they need to be aware of the world around them. And one of the biggest pieces of the world around them is the political world in which they live.
In today's world, we have 10 days left. And obviously it's a major, major, major moment in this country politically. But could you speak to the importance of down ballot? Could you speak to the importance of the off-year participation? And is there a race, a political race, or an issue that we all need to focus on? Because it will impact the local school board or county commissioner. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is there something that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, because I think one of the problems we have is that we're so consumed by the presidential race. I mean, how could you not be? We're being bombarded. Over $500 million in advertising has been dumped on us here in Pennsylvania, with much of it coming here in Philadelphia and the counties around us, almost to the point where it seems like saturation bombing from World War II. There's no escape. But actually, there are a lot of important elections going on besides the presidential election. I mean, obviously, the next step down, we've got a senatorial race here that is important for us in terms of representation in Pennsylvania, but also is important, and it might actually tip the Senate one way or the other. That has broad implications for national government, because if the Democrats can still control the Senate, it's going to affect whoever's president, the appointive power. It's going to affect foreign relations. Where does the Senate act? And obviously, it'll affect any kind of legislative possibility. Same thing, one could say that there are also important, some more contested than others, depending where you are, but very important House races here in Pennsylvania that, along with several others in New York and California that had gone to the Republicans the last round, that if they go into the Democratic column, a couple incumbents holding on here, people winning seats in those other places, the Democrats might get control of the House of Representatives. That has broad implications. The House is what generates so-called money bills, et cetera. Appropriations start there. So those things are national, but they have obvious local effects. But let's get closer to it. There are also important statewide races. And again, they've almost been eclipsed completely by the national races and especially the presidential race. One, for example, is the Attorney General's race that goes on here. Now, the Attorney General's office is an extremely important office, partly because our current governor, Josh Shapiro, extended its reach in terms of its interest when he was Attorney General. It's also been the jumping off point for candidates who would become governor, and two of the recent governors actually were attorneys general. One was Shapiro, and the other, and I forgot him, the Republican who preceded Wolf. But so it's seen as a kind of a staging area because attorneys general do a lot of important work, not just to make sure any of the laws are enforced, et cetera, but also in terms of a lot of investigative work. In Pennsylvania, for example, and it's not a pretty story, but it's needed to know about, all the abuses by priests, et cetera, were vigorously being investigated by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. So there are a lot of things that that office does. It's a very important office. It's a statewide office. It's a very contested office, like virtually everything else this year. We're learning more negatives than positives about the candidates, but it's worth watching because it will affect you. There's also the Auditor General's race that's going on. These are called row house offices: Auditor General, State Treasurer, Attorney General. That's going on. That's also highly contested. And the Auditor General is basically the fiscal oversight, the fiscal overseer of what goes on in the state, and can investigate as well. And of course, if you want your tax dollars to be spent the way they're supposed to be, if you want government organizations to run responsibly, the Auditor General will in effect do that as any auditing exercise would demand. But they also are doing more investigative work as well to make sure that not only things are run according to good accounting, but they're run according to the law. And then we have a state treasurer's race. Same thing. The state treasurer obviously controls the money, and including being involved in major investments from the state, but also from pension funds. The state treasurer sits on the pension boards for the public employees and for teachers. That's another race. So just those three row offices make up a good chunk of the executive branch of the state government. And even though it's not sexy, each one affects your life in important ways. So I would look at those. I'd look as well, depending where you are. We should everywhere, but some of the races for the state assembly and for the state Senate will also have a tremendous impact, because the control of those two houses of our assembly are razor thin. So a swing one way or the other could dramatically affect who's in control and the kinds of legislation that will come out. Democrats having a very different agenda in terms of how to fund schooling, for example, than Republicans do. Very, very different agenda in terms of environmental legislation than Republicans do. So if you take a close look at the offices, the Senate race, House races, row house races, assembly races, we can say this election of 2024, and people are saying it, is an inflection point. It's the most important election since 1860, which is probably true for the presidency. But you can take that aside. It's an extremely important election in terms of who we are, what we do, what we can do, what we want to do in Pennsylvania.
Now I want to ask you to be the professor, be all of our professors, all the people that are going to engage with Make a Difference, the podcast. Beyond voting, which we pray that everybody takes up that responsibility, right? What's something that everybody out there can do to make a difference in this political landscape?
Well, thanks for that question. To me, the answer is very simple. learn how things work and why they work. Civic education, which we can formalize through schools. We used to have them. When I was growing up, you had to take courses on government. You had to learn how a piece of legislation was introduced and passed. You had to learn the basic functions of the various offices. And you had to be prepared to be an active, engaged, responsible citizen. What Jefferson said is the key to a successful republic, echoed by so many other people. So civic education. So civic education can and should be, of course, going on in our schools, but civic education can and should be going on among all of ourselves. We should learn about it. And there are many opportunities to do that, because informed about how government works, we can also then make sure that government does work, that it works with responsible people who are going to be acting responsible for the common weal. And perhaps there's an extra responsibility for that for us in Pennsylvania. After all, Pennsylvania is one of only 4 commonwealths in the United States. We're a state, but we're also a commonwealth, which gives us a special responsibility, because to be a commonwealth means that you are formed in order to promote the common weal, the common good, which means we really have to know how things work. So I would argue the one thing we all can do to make a difference, it would make a difference in our communities. It'll make a difference in whatever larger area of work that you do. It'll make a difference in the country, is civic education. Learn about how government is supposed to work, how government does work, and how can you make government work better.
Spectacular. And this is the one that we end all of our guest segments with. Who's made a difference in your life, Doc? In your life, who's made the difference?
I mean, obviously, my mother had a tremendous influence on me. But in terms of, in many ways, shaping how I think about the world, et cetera, and this is actually appropriate because we're in Philadelphia and we're in Pennsylvania. In the end, Benjamin Franklin. I've used Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Only 2 books I've used since I started teaching in the U.S. History Survey class, which I use autobiography. We're an autobiographical people, so get people reading autobiographies. Autobiographies are self-inventions, and the greatest self-inventor of all, of course, was Benjamin Franklin, who created a self as well as creating all these cool things. It might be bifocals and what have you. But the thing I loved about Franklin that influenced me enormously, and you try to convey this to students, and it comes through if you read his stuff, he was always curious. He was always had a sense of wonder. He was always willing to risk failure out of that curiosity, that sense of wonder. He never stopped wanting to learn, and he knew he could learn from anything, and he could learn from anybody. And that sense of constant possibility, of course, made him so successful in so many different activities, whether it was a lightning rod, whether it was creating a government, et cetera. And I think strongly influenced me that tremendous sense of possibility, and that it doesn't stop when you're 40 years old, 50 years old, a young guy like you, Phil, an old guy like me. Every day there's a possibility of learning something. And I'm going to relate one other person to that because they had the same quality, not necessarily the same possibility in terms of the kind of things you do, but Abraham Lincoln as well. And the genius of Abraham Lincoln, there were many aspects to it, but he's always willing. He listened to learn. He read to learn, because he knew that he didn't know it all. And he had this tremendous capacity for growth intellectually, for growth socially, for growth morally, et cetera. I mean, that's a gift. We all have that gift if we would just look at it, accept it, and then do and use it. So I think I'm going to claim 2 people, but especially Benjamin Franklin.
Wow. Jared, you're young.
Somewhat.
Right? You're somewhat young. What just happened with Dr. Miller is he taught. And every day teach, every day learn. And now you know why every single conversation that I had with Doc, and we could have been talking about free throw shooting, I always came away better and more knowledgeable. You've done it again. My friend, I appreciate you joining us. You've made a difference.
Well, thank you. And Phil, you've made a huge difference as well. Our conversations were always reciprocal, always back and forth. I think we learn from each other, and that's the beauty of a friendship.
I appreciate it. Hope to see you soon.
Dr. Miller, thanks for joining us. That really was terrific. I've always had such a just a piqued interest. A little known fact about me, I'm a political science minor, so I have went through a lot of the I would say rigmarole of learning about some of the inner workings of civics, especially in Philadelphia, learning at a Temple, and so much of that fascinates me. And it's like Dr. Miller said, I mean, it should be required learning for everyone to understand exactly how your community works. And because people just spend so much time looking at the macro of this election, and if you really look down at like what is affecting me on a daily basis, it is you, like you said. I mean, it's your
county commissioner,
county commissioner, your city council person, these people that are making
school
decisions
boards
that are affecting. Yeah, if you're not attending your school board meetings, then you have no say in your child's education.
That was way beyond my wildest dreams. That was a class. That was tremendous stuff. And I didn't know this, that he bypassed law school, as did I. I don't know if you knew this, but your great-grandmother was always thinking, I wonder if Phil could be the Pope and the president at the same time. She's the one person that believed that I could do that. So my idea, because I was piqued by politics, was law school and then politics. And I got engaged my senior year in college and said, well, I better go get a job. So I couldn't wait to cash that $4,000 check from the Catholic schools that I got my first year teaching.
I'll tell you what, I will say president, you were a president.
I was a president.
Pope, I don't know, maybe some people for a time argued you're, no, nothing like that.
No.
Not close.
No, I am fallible.
Dr. Miller was terrific, and I think it just goes without saying, obviously, with this election coming up, we have to urge everybody to get involved in any way you can, whether that's campaigning, whether that's knocking doors, whether that's just simply casting your ballot.
Vote, put a sign on your lawn, whatever it takes. You just heard from an expert. The most meaningful election since 1860. Wow. But that's where we'll be next Tuesday, right?
We got some time.
To make sure that I cast my ballot. But there have been other places.
Well, there's always somewhere where you're headed to. It is time to find out where in the world is Phil Martelli. Where have you been this past week? Like I said, once again, coming from a busy day, dressed to the nines, making me look like a fool in my T-shirt here. No. Do I need to start wearing a suit or?
No.
Okay, good.
I don't think there were a mosaic this week. I was able to attend a college scrimmage as a media member. Like I was able to get into a college scrimmage. I was a guest on a podcast called Full Court Press, where they cover only college basketball. It was really kind of a terrific one. I had a couple of great visits. Michael Rouse from ESF, and then a visit with Johan Promotions. Just really special. But every day's been busy, but I have to share two misses because I will be going later in the week. I'll be going to Minnesota to do a clinic, and one touches me. Greg Harden is, there are two people in college athletics who to me are on the mountaintop as human beings. One is Don DeJulia, and the other one was Greg Harden. Greg Harden was at Michigan, and he was basically the coach. He coached the coaches. He coached the student athletes. If you asked Desmond Howard, who was most influential in your path through Michigan, he would have said Greg Harden. Greg Harden passed away, and his celebration of life will be at the Chrysler Arena on the Michigan campus on Thursday, and I can't make that. And that hurts a little bit. I hold them in my prayers, and I say this with reverence. The fact that I got to meet Greg Harden, that was the greatest part of the 5 years at Michigan. The fact that I could call him a friend, and the fact that I can recall many of the conversations. So I'm missing that. And then the other one, and this one blew me away. I got an invitation for a lunch on Friday. I won't be in the area Friday until later in the evening. I'll be going to the Widener Hall of Fame to close that event up for them. But I was invited Friday to have lunch at Governor Ed Rendell's house, with the invitees being Michael Barkan. I'm not sure how he's not on a pregame or a postgame show Friday, but Michael Barkan, Angelo Cataldi, Ray Didinger. And when I looked at the invitation and I said, do I have plane trouble? Do I not? But no, that's not the way that we're going to work. So I'm looking forward to the trip from Minnesota. I have asked that they video that conversation, because talk about gaining knowledge with Michael and Ray and Angelo, the Gov, it would be just fantastic, but it's not to be. So maybe another time that'll happen.
That is such an all-star cast for you too, because as you're kind of making this transition from coach to really media member, I mean, those are guys that have been doing it for a long time and doing it really well. I mean, even the governor ever. I mean, how many years was he on the Eagles post game?
It was. I'm so honored and humbled to have been invited, and there's a little disappointment that I can't make it. But you know what? I thought that would make for a good story on the podcast, and then we could talk about in the future that lunch is going to happen again, and I'm going to be there unless we're working right here on Make a Difference, because next week's guest is going to turn the world upside down again.
I think it is going to be one that quite a few people are going to be locked in for. Yeah. Do you want to I guess pull the curtain back?
Well, first of all, I think that we should present the idea of happy birthday to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Great celebration. May your days be full of love, laughter, and happiness.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And spread it out. Don't make it just a day. Make it a week. Make it a month. Make it this year.
I'll make it the rest of my life if I can.
Make it a celebration.
I'll let everybody know.
Make it a celebration. And I just need to know, because I'm not in tune with this social media. Where can people find us? Where can they find out? Because not only am I interested in where I've been, now I'm not interested, but others might find it interesting on where I've been. How about if somebody wants me to come to them? I'm happy. I'm retired. I have all kinds of time to come make a difference with someone else.
Well, before we get to that, I just hit me. Very cool. This year you turned 70, big 7-0. Well, it's 30 for me. So 2 milestone birthdays for both of us in the year 2024, which I thought was pretty cool. But for people that are looking for us, just to let them know, number one, I know you want to plug P&J Make a Difference. If people are heading to any opportunity where they feel like they can make a difference, whether it's in their school, in their community, in any way, shape, or form, head to P&J Make a Difference, because there's a good chance that Phil here is going to have an opportunity to help you make a difference, and he hopes to do that in your organization, in your school, and on social media. If you guys are really looking to find us and find more of our content, that is Make a Difference Pod, at Make a Difference Pod on everything. On Twitter, it's Make a Diff Pod. And, of course, Phil_Martelli on Instagram for the Martelli Minute.
We have a business email. That's P&J Make a Difference at gmail.com. Anything. And share a story, share a suggestion. We want to make this user-friendly. And we want you to feel that you have an ownership in this. And then next week, just delighted that we are going to welcome the president of the National Association of Basketball Coaches, who just happens to be the Hall of Fame coach at the University of Arkansas. So John Calipari. Now, Jared, the only thing people have often accused me of talking. Once we get Cal on here, we might have to go for a double. I don't know how you do all your technical stuff, but put in for extra time.
Yeah.
On any of our platforms, just say this might be a special edition.
Am I getting a word in next week?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I had a feeling you two were going to get going, and it's just a runaway train at that point.
That's very accurate. But we have to have script. We're going to stay on script.
Well, I'll try. I'll give it a shot, but I mean, all bets are off, I feel like, when the mic is on with you two, but really, really excited for John Calipari to join us. Obviously, a ton he's got to update us on with his journey, obviously starting a new role and as president of the NABC. I mean, there's just so much that he's got going on in his life right now, and there's so many ways I'm sure he's trying to make a difference.
Oh, he has made huge difference in Kentucky, and I'm sure he's doing the same in Arkansas, and he did it at UMass. He did it with the Nets, the New Jersey Nets. He did it when he was with the Sixers. Remember, he was an assistant with Larry Brown. Cal is really, really, really good people.
It's going to be an awesome, awesome show. Make sure you're tuned in for that one next week. We really, that's, I think, all we got for you. This is a pretty bulky episode. I mean, Dr. Miller was fantastic and gave us a lecture, a teaching lesson that is something that I'm going to be sitting with for quite some time, and we hope you got out of it what we did as well. Like I mentioned on previous shows, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. Give us 5 stars if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Really excited to keep getting this thing rolling, couple episodes deep, and not only this coming guest we have next week, but we're gonna get pretty basketball heavy in the next few weeks, and I think that's gonna get people pretty amped up and pretty excited for the season.
I hope so. Thank you.